Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. As we get to the close of the book of Deuteronomy, and as such we get to the end of the Pentateuch, we come across some very important principles, especially in connection to the blessings and the cursings that are mentioned here in the latter part of Deuteronomy. And one of the principles that we learn is that God gives us the dignity to choose whether we are going to serve him or whether we're not going to serve him. He set before them a choice on that day of which way they would go, whether they would obey the commandments of the Lord or if they go after the rebellion of their heart. And so God gave them a choice. And likewise, God gives us a choice as well. The Lord presents for each and every one of us the options of either coming to him through faith in Jesus Christ and obeying him and going through life with him, or in rejecting his son and going the other direction. And we too have a choice to make, and God gives us the dignity to be able to make that choice and to be able to decide which route we will take. But the other principle that we learn from the latter part of Deuteronomy is that choices have consequences. And that is very much emphasized here at the close of Deuteronomy. The choice that they made, they were allowed to make the choice, but with the understanding that they had to deal with the consequences of the choices that they did make. And so this would both provide encouragement to follow the Lord and his commandments, but also a warning against not following the Lord and going after other gods. And so here we also have this principle of consequences and how our choices lead to consequences. And that's a principle that we can hold on to even today. To know that, yes, the Lord allows us a choice, but at the same time, he gives consequences to those choices that we make. And it ought to be that as we begin to feel the consequences that come from perhaps the times in which we stray from the Lord, that would wake us up and allow us to turn our direction back to the Lord and to go back into the direction of blessing. And so that's an important principle as well. One, that we have a choice. Two, that choices have consequences. But there's a third principle here that is also very, very important. And it really does change our whole approach to a lot of different things. And that is that God's grace is always available to us. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, after the Lord talks about the rebellion of the people, and it's spoken as though a prophecy that is for sure going to happen, and we know as we read through the Old Testament that this very much does come true, that the people will persist in rebellion, they will follow after other gods, they will continually break the covenant that they made with God, and eventually they will end up in exile. Eventually they will be scattered among the nations. And even in that situation, even when the Lord pushes them out of the promised land, even when they're out in exile, out in the nations, the Lord still says that if you call out to me, I will have compassion on you, and I will restore you again. This is what it says in chapter 30, in the early part of the chapter. It says, "So it shall be when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all nations where the Lord your God has banished you, and you return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and soul, and according to all that I command you today, you and your sons, then the Lord your God will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you." Even after centuries and generations after generations of rebellion and not listening to the Lord, even after all of that, if they would turn their hearts to the Lord, he would have compassion on them and restore them again. And that's a promise to us as well. We know we have choices, but we also know that we make bad choices, not just some of the time, but probably a lot of the time. And sometimes we feel the weight of the consequences of those bad choices. But we can be confident as we read these passages in Deuteronomy that if we will but turn to the Lord, if we'll repent of those sins, if we'll turn our faces back to the Lord, he will show us compassion, and he will invite us back in. As the father in the parable of the prodigal son ran out to meet his son, so the Lord will invite us in and will allow us to be restored back to him again. Now, it might be that we might still have to pick up the pieces of our bad choices, some remnants of our bad choices, and the consequences therein might still persist. But in relation to our relationship with God, we will be restored again. And we begin to live a life of close communion with him, a blessing, spiritual blessing with him, and be able to enjoy the sweetness of his presence and the joy of walking with him each and every day. And so if we find ourselves in a situation where we've messed up, we've made bad choices, and we begin to feel the consequences of those choices, it's never too late to turn back. It's never too late to go back to God and seek him once again. So when we find ourselves in that situation, let's do that. Let's seek the Lord with the confidence that he will restore us again. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.